client meetings. Just a quick agenda for this meeting. So we're going to talk about how to measure meetings and then get into the critical part, which is how to provide value for your clients. So we'll go deep into that one. And then I'll talk briefly about the ideal meeting structure and a little bit about translating client speak, what they say versus what they mean, and then a brief Q&A if you've got any questions at the end. So firstly, why do meetings matter? Well, this might be an obvious one, but meetings, like a client is paying you as a service provider and they're paying you good money, and they're constantly facing, I guess, question marks internally as to, is this service provider really worth the money? Are they doing a good job? Are they earning their money? And so, not to put sort of pressure on yourself in every meeting, but that really is the reality of why you have meetings in the first place. A client basically wants to check in on you at a regular basis to make sure you're doing a good job for them. It's as simple as that. And meetings for you are a chance to show exactly that you are indeed doing a good job and that you are not only just worth the expense, but you are over-delivering. So one of the issues that I think we have as professional service providers is we go to meetings and we do our best, but there's no real way to measure how effective meetings are. You can get some sort of vague feelings from clients as to whether or not it's a positive vibe or whether they seem to be getting value out of it. But there's this quote that I really like from Peter Drucker, which is what gets measured gets managed. And if you're not measuring your client meetings, then it's hard to manage them and improve them. And you can obviously ask clients directly for their feedback, and they might tell you that they're not getting the value that they want, or the meetings are not going according to they want. But clients are funny. Some of them are comfortable giving negative feedback or constructive criticism, but many are not. Many clients are just not comfortable doing it, and so you really need to sort of dig through the feedback, the direct feedback, and try and pick up on behavioural cues that tell the full story. And so I've listed them here, and I'd like to call them key meeting indicators as opposed to key performance indicators. These are the key indicators of how your meeting is running. So I'll just firstly go through the negative indicators on the left. So if you're experiencing some or all of these on the left-hand side, then this is not a great sign. So if the focus of your meeting is squarely on you and what you're doing, it's often accompanied with a high degree of scrutiny from the clients. They've got lots of questions about what you're doing. They're very much into the details of what you're doing, and they're really trying to scrutinize and pick apart every little thing you do just to make sure that you're doing a good job. And if your discussion is limited to just the things that you're managing, if they're not seeking your opinion on things outside of your remit, that's not a great sign as well. And if at the end of meetings you end up with a laundry list of to-do items, again, that's not a key indicator of a really strong meeting. And of course, this is one that I think we've all had at some point over the years ourselves, but if you've got a particular client meeting that really fills you with dread, then that's obviously not a great sign. Now, on the flip side, if we have a look at what the indicators of a positive meeting look like, a positive meeting is one where the discussion centers on the client's business as opposed to you and what you're doing. It's more about the client. What's the next step for their business? What do they need help with? And if the client is coming to you proactively and surfacing some of their challenges and some of their issues that they need help with, and they actually want your input, that's a really good sign. And an even better sign is when clients actually don't just want your input on the things that you manage, but they start to invite your opinion on things that are outside of your direct remit. So it might be some weird and wonderful issues that you have, sometimes you've got absolutely no idea about, but the fact that the clients start to ask you about that, you can take that as a real compliment. You'll often find with really positive meetings that the action items is not just a long laundry list for yourself to do, but it's actually a shared list between yourself, some to-do items for yourself, but also some items for your client to do as well. And obviously the vibe of the meetings are generally positive. If that's the case, then those are really good signs. Okay, so how do we get a good meeting that has all those positive indicators? Well, there's really one thing that summarizes everything, and that is value. If you are able to provide value to your clients in your meetings, that is really the secret to meeting success. So easier said than done. What is what does that look like? How do we actually provide value? So one of the keys, like I mentioned or alluded to in the previous slide, one of the keys really is to shift the focus away from the details about you and what you're doing, and focus instead on the client, what their business is doing, what challenges they're facing, what they're struggling with, and most importantly, how can you help? It's much, much easier to be able to be in a position to provide value for your clients when you're talking about what they're doing as opposed to what you're doing. And so a typical meeting, it might typically focus around what you've done, some of the hits and misses, or some of the highlights and lowlights of your work during the week or during the month, and then what's next for you. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can't mention any of that. Of course you do. You do have to. It's your meeting, and the client's going to want an update. But the more and more that you can start to talk about the client as opposed to yourself, the more and more opportunities are going to open up where you can insert some value in. And that value may be in the form of ideas, it may be in the form of insights, it may be in the form of providing solutions for them. And the key for you really is the owner of the meeting is to constantly ask questions, or not constantly ask questions, but ask questions and really probe and dig out the information from the clients. If they're not really in a sort of comfortable place with you at the moment, then they're going to be a little bit apprehensive about really opening up to you and giving you a whole lot of information. But the more value you can add, the more and more open the client's going to be, and the more receptive they are going to be to giving you that information. So let's have a look at what that might look like with an example. So let's just say you ask something like, so what's ahead for the business? And the client says, oh, we might need to go on sale soon. So now you've just got to probe a little bit more, and you say, why is that? And they say, oh, we have an oversupply of perishable stock. So they're obviously going to go on sale to try and get rid of that stock before it expires. And you've got an opportunity to provide an insightful question here. So you say, have you considered increasing advertising spend? We've done that previously and we've maintained ROI. And they say, oh yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. And now you can add your value. You can say it'll help you sell your stock without having to go on sale and eating into your margin. So, and the client obviously, that's a much better option for them to sell their stock at full price and still maintain that ROI, as opposed to go on sale and eat into their margins. So that's just a small, simple example of a few sort of innocuous questions that lead to a stage where you can deliver a solution that's far more valuable than the idea that they had, which was to go on sale. All right, so that's basically the structure, is sort of like question, 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 value. Question, 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 value. You can't just sit back and just ask question after question after question after question without providing some sort of solution or some sort of idea or something of value to the client. Because if you're just sitting back and forever asking questions, the client's going to be like, why are you asking so many questions? What is the point? Just like get on with it and do your job. So you've really got to do that dance between question, question, value. And the more often you do it, like I said, the more receptive the client is going to be, and the more forthcoming they'll be with information. And they'll actually get to a point where they proactively surface information, present it to you and say, so what do you think? What should we do? And again, if you get to that stage, that's a huge sign that you're really in a good spot with the client. Okay, so what are some of the other additional ways that you can also add value? So like I mentioned before, asking insightful questions and getting the client to talk about themselves and opening up some information and give you the opportunity to provide value, that's a really critical way. But here are three little sort of side ways of adding value as well. So firstly, bring some analysis and insight to the table. So ahead of your meeting, you can analyze something like the client's website or the client's product sales or their audience demographics, and you can just pick out some interesting observations or perhaps highlight some problems with the websites or some products that are not doing particularly well. And this is going to be of value to clients. And the thing I love about this is it's so easy, because you don't even have to come up with a solution necessarily. You can just make an interesting observation about where their website is failing. And you can sort of say, look, over to you to fix. And that would be of value. Now, if you come up with a solution as well, then that's a real bonus for the client. But you don't necessarily have to. Just surfacing a potential problem is of value to the client. So that's a nice, easy one that you can do ahead of time, ahead of your meeting, with a little bit of analysis. The other way to add value is to not just limit your responses to things that are within scope. So obviously clients hire you for a particular job, but if you have experience or expertise in something that's outside of scope, and the client's having an issue with that, you're absolutely entitled to offer an opinion. In fact, the client would appreciate that, because if it's something they're struggling with and you've got experience with it, then they absolutely would love to hear from you. And if you say, well, look, I don't really have a whole lot of expertise outside my area, that's fine. But if you're working at something like an agency with, you know, a dozen or more people, there's every chance that someone, one of your colleagues, is going to have that information that's outside of the direct remit. So you can leverage your friends and your colleagues as well. It doesn't have to be just your own knowledge. And then the last one, and I think this is a really critical one, and one that's so easy to do, is to surface the hidden value. So every professional service provider does a whole lot more for their clients than their clients actually see. And it's worth, on occasion, just surfacing that value. So going to your client and just drawing back the curtain and showing them behind the scenes a little bit about some of the optimizations you might do to the account, some of the safety measures you might have in place, some of the risk management procedures, some of the tools and technology. Marketing agencies, for example, spend thousands and thousands of dollars on the latest MarTech and AdTech, and sometimes it just gets taken for granted and clients don't even realize it. They don't even know that the value that's being added to their activity. So it's something that you shouldn't do at every single meeting, but just every now and again, if you're a little bit light on for content at your meeting, it's a good idea to surface some of the things that do go on behind the scenes that are adding value to their clients. Like in that example I used, the client wasn't surfacing information because they expected a solution, but it was just like, I just made that example up, obviously, but it's just like, here's an idea. Why don't we just turn up the budget before all your produce expires, or whatever it was I put in that example, and that way you save your margins. And I've had many examples that are similar to that, where you just sort of probe the client, just question, just try and peel away the information and just get to the bottom of what their drama is. And then you say, well, hang on, why don't you just do this? And they're like, oh, that's a much better idea than what we were going to do. Or they say, we can't do that, but you've given me another idea, which is actually much better. So thank you for that. And you're like, I didn't do anything. And they're like, no, you did. You helped me get to a better solution. And that counts as well. That you'll take that as a valuable contribution as well. But that is, I guess, the art of really mastering meetings is, I don't want to say surprise value, but it's just, it's discovered value. It's you don't expect to go in and give them a solution about why they shouldn't run a sale in that example, but you do, because it just comes to light, and you've got a better way of doing things, and you drop that idea. Yeah, sort of like they might come to you with an instruction saying, can you run some marketing to improve our social media numbers? And not normal, but a typical agency will say, yeah, we can do that. What's the budget? This is how we're going to do it. But, for me, like the way I was trained to do it was like, yeah, we can do that, but hang on, why? Like, I want to understand, what do you need numbers for? Like, is this just vanity metrics? Is there revenue attached to this audience? Give me a reason why. I can do it, but I don't want to do it until I know what the point is. And just in those conversations, you peel back the layers and you might find it might be a directive that's come from someone else that no one thinks is a good idea, or there might be an actual reason where, the audience data is then going to be sold on for this price. And it's just like, oh, if you're selling it for that much, you should be spending a lot more because you're going to make a heap, whatever it is. Like, I'm making it up. But the more and more you peel back, the more ideas, just like the ideas are there for you, because once you have all the information, the solution's actually easy, to be honest. The hard part is getting all the information and getting all the moving parts together and putting all before yourself and the client, saying, all right, if this is what we're playing with, why are you asking us to do this? We should be doing this is better, and this is better, or this is like 3 better options. And they're like, okay, now that you play it all like that, you're right. Let's take option 2 or whatever it is. All right. And the last thing I want to speak about just briefly is decoding client speak. So sometimes what a client says and what a client means are not always the same thing. For example, a good one, like one that I've had a lot in my marketing career, was ideas that we take to clients which do have a cost to them, but ultimately are quite valuable solutions. And you would take this idea, which might be an idea that costs the client $10,000, but ultimately would bring them in revenue of, say, $100,000 or more. So it is well worth their interest. It is in their interest to do it. And what the client will say is, we don't have the budget. Now, what that actually means is we don't see the value. And the reason why it means that we don't see the value is because if they truly saw the value, if they truly understood or truly believed that a $10,000 investment can get them $100,000 in revenue, or perhaps more, whatever it might be, I'm just making up these numbers, obviously. But if they saw that value and they genuinely understood it and genuinely believed it, their response would be more like, look, I'm going to find a budget. We don't have the budget, but I'll find a way. I'm going to present this to my boss or my manager, or whoever it might be, but I'll get this moving. We don't have the budget right now, but leave it with me. It's going to happen because they understand the value. And if they just simply say, can't do it, we don't have the budget, what it really means is we don't see the value. So your follow-up questions, you need to understand this and recognize this. And instead of saying, oh, you know, can you get budget, or when do you think you might have budget? Like those are sort of pointless follow-up questions, because it's really not a question of budget, it's a question of value. And so instead you need to tailor your follow-ups. If you do want to persist and follow up, you need to understand that they're not seeing the value. So instead of asking them about budget, go back and present the solution to them as well, to them again, and make sure that they understand the value that comes with it. Another common one is you might come to the client with an idea they should do this to their website, or they should do this or that with their social community, and they'll say, oh yeah, good idea, but we don't have the time. And again, we don't have the time. No one has the time, right? We've all got a long list of things to do. We don't have the time actually means we don't think it's important enough to spend time on. And so again, you don't want to follow up by saying, oh, when do you think you'll have the time? Or, you know, next month, are you going to have the time? Like, these are pointless questions, because it's not about time. They don't recognize it as important. But if you can go back and just explain the importance of it and the impact it's going to have, once they get it, it's no longer going to be a case of, oh, we don't have the time. It's now going to be a case of, all right, I'm going to prioritize this next week or tomorrow, and I'm just going to like dump everything else on my to-do list. Another simple one is if you present an idea to them and they say, oh, we'll have a think about it, that basically is a polite way of saying, no, no thanks, this is not something we're interested in. So the point here really is to not have a conversation with your clients about what they say. You've got to understand what they actually, what's the meaning behind what they're saying, and have a conversation about that. All right, so as time goes on, your meetings should hopefully start to evolve for the better, where that focus goes away from you and the details of what you're doing, and instead starts to shift towards the client's business. What's ahead for the client's business? What are they struggling with? What are some of their issues? What are some of their challenges? But that shift is not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to go from the client scrutinizing you to being completely collaborative overnight. You need to deliver value consistently, and over time you will win over the client. And like I said before, they'll start to open up and provide information. And when they're doing it unprompted, that's when you know you've really got the client in your hand. So I just want to share what I think the ideal meeting structure should look like. So there's two scales here. On the bottom scale, we've got, this is basically a time scale. So reading from left to right, this is the start of the meeting and the end of the meeting from left to right. So the first phase of your meeting should really be focused on the client's business. So you can open up with some simple questions at the start of your meetings, just like, how's business? I love that question. It's just such a simple way to open a meeting. And it gets the client talking about their business and, you know, surfacing their challenges and their issues and other things you might be able to help with. So how's business? What are you struggling with? And depending on where you're at with your client, if you're in a really good spot with them, then this phase one of the meeting, this could last, you know, this could last most of the meeting, really. if the client is not quite, in that space where they're ready to, they haven't quite trusted you and they're not quite ready to open up and really divulge everything, then this could be a short phase. But anyway, this is how you open a meeting ideally, is just by starting on the client, their business, and what are their struggles. The next phase is obviously your work. So you do have to, in every meeting, obviously update the client on what you're doing. So it'd be something like, here's our results, this is what we're currently testing. So it goes from sort of on the vertical axis, it goes from the bigger picture of what the client's business is doing down to the details of what you're doing. And then the final phase of the meeting is when you start to sort of color outside the square a little bit and start to talk some ideas that are maybe outside your direct remit. So it could be things like, have you considered these potential partners, or here are some ideas for your website or for your social community, whatever it might be. So that's the sort of structure that I think you really need to follow with all of your meetings going forward. So that meeting curve. So having, like, opening up with questions about their business, how's business, how you doing, what are you struggling with, what are your issues? It sets the tone of the meeting. If you save it for the end, it's kind of like it's kind of like an afterthought, right? But when you make it front and center, the first thing you do, it sets the tone for the meeting. And then, when you get to, like, if you start with their business, add value. So they say, I'm struggling with this, and you say, have you thought about this? And it's like value, value, value. And then you say, okay, now here's what I've been doing. It's almost like, I don't care anymore. Like, it doesn't matter. I trust that you're doing a good job. Like, I don't need to see, I don't need to check up on you. So it really does set the tone in the right way. But the other thing is, you don't need to add it as an agenda item. So if you send the agenda out to your client saying, agenda item number 1, how's business? Like, what are you doing? It can be a little bit like, oh, hang on, am I getting scrutinized in this meeting? So start with it, but just, you don't have to put it on the agenda, because it could be a bit confronting for them. And instead you can just say, all right, before we get into the meeting, like, how's business? It can be just sort of a casual thing, and that casual opening could last 3/4 of the meeting. All right. So in light of everything, let's just have a quick revisit of our key meeting indicators that we highlighted before. So like I said, when you've got the attention that's squarely focused on you and what you're doing, it does attract a degree of scrutiny and a lot of questions, and you end up with a long list of laundry list of to-do items at the end of the meeting. Whereas a much more positive meeting is one where the discussion centers on the client's business. You're talking about their challenges, their issues. You're actually solving problems for them as you go, and the client invites your opinion on all matters, not just within your remit, but also outside your remit. And meetings are generally positive. All right, so that's about it. For those watching the replay who don't know me and my background, I've worked in medical research, I've worked in financial services, I've been in digital marketing for the last 10 years or so, where I was head of client success for a digital marketing agency, a performance agency, and I was head of strategy at one point as well. But as head of client success, my brief was really to manage the C-level relationships amongst our clients. And I acquired a lot of skills, people management skills, relationship management skills, and all those skills that I acquired can be easily taught to someone else. So if you're interested and you want to learn more about relationship management and the art of how to manage clients, then please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy for just a discussion. And you can contact me however you like and whenever you like.